Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Christine Grimmett here with a few of my colleagues from Heartbeat International. We have Jessica Warner. She's on our communications and marketing team, and she was recently in an episode that was published actually just a few weeks ago on politics and pregnancy help organizations. So it was fitting to bring her in yet again. But you can scroll back just a bit and find that episode. And then we have Leanna Baumer, who is a newer member of the Heartbeat team. She's with our mission and advancement team. Her background also includes being the executive director at a pregnancy center in Virginia. So she has a lot of experience to bring to this conversation. And then we have another member of our Heartbeat team, Lora Current, she works closely on our social media and marketing and also works closely with the executive team. We keep her busy here. But outside of her work here at Heartbeat, she also has been working on the state level as we're seeing some interesting legislative things happening here in Ohio, which is where the office of Heartbeat International is located. So we've been following some things in Ohio closely as it relates to what's happening on a national level. We'll talk more about what that means. I'll let Laura explain what some other states are looking towards the future and could possibly see as well. And of course, our regular podcast listeners hear me talk about pregnancy help news quite often. With November elections approaching, and in addition to the many things that are affecting the pregnancy help movement right now, it is one of the easiest ways to stay up to date on the news. You can actually get those articles sent directly to your inbox by a weekly digest, and that is easy to sign up for. You can sign up at pregnancyhelpnews.com. I really enjoy those weekly updates, not just for the political news, but for news about pregnancy help around the world. There are encouraging stories. There are client stories. There are the news about, a center expanding services, doing something unique, doing something new. And it's a great way for everyone to stay in the loop. And you can sign up for those weekly updates at pregnancyhelpnews.com, and those are free. So why not take advantage of that resource? So let's get started with some background here. Laura, we will start with you. What is happening in Ohio, and why are other states watching Ohio so closely right now?
Yes. Well, hi, Christine. It's good to talk to you. So what we started seeing here in Ohio and in other states, and what we're seeing coming to other states here in the next couple years, really started with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which was a wonderful thing in so many different reasons. But what it did was it gave the power to decide abortion laws back to the states. And so we saw right when that happened, many pro-life states immediately put legislation in place, whether it be the heartbeat bill or total bans, while more of pro-abortion states did the opposite and put more abortion laws into effect, incredibly extreme abortion laws. But then we start looking at states, the Midwest being a great example of many states this is going to happen to, and is happening here in Ohio, that we're more in the middle. And we can see that in our past just election history of kind of being red versus blue, but looking at the life debate, because we're a rural a rural state, but with big cities, we've really gone back and forth. So what makes Ohio so interesting and different from even other states that have passed pro-abortion laws is that we have a majority Republican House and Senate, along with a Republican governor. And so instead of big abortion led here in the state of Ohio by the ACLU, trying to go through our House and our Senate to get pro-abortion legislation passed, they've started a ballot initiative. And so this is very important to understand the difference and the significance of the difference between a ballot initiative that changes our constitution, our state constitution, versus a normal bill that will go through the House. So just a quick little recap. When a bill goes through the House into the Senate, it goes through committee hearings. There's testimonies given by both sides and is able to be vetted really, really well. Well, when these big abortion groups are going after a ballot initiative, they can create whatever language that they desire as a group. There's not this vetting process between legislators or other groups. They have to get that language approved, but in the reality is it can be very broad, and that's what we're seeing in Ohio. And so the way they get this passed is they have to get a certain amount of signatures, which they have started collecting signatures back in January of this year, January 2023, for the November 2023 election. They were able to get, I believe, correct me, Jessica, if this is wrong, 300,000 signatures around
yes,
that
I think
number.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so they were able to achieve that. So that means that it directly goes on to the ballot in November. So it doesn't have to go through the House and the Senate in order to be voted on. It goes into the ballot directly. And so what that needs to be passed then is a 50% plus one majority, which is, it sounds, when you're thinking about majority rules, that sounds fairly fair, I would say, but that's actually an extremely low percentage needed to get. I mean, there's only a few states that even allow this type of constitutional amendment, and most of the states that do allow it have a 60%. I mean, even majorly pro-abortion states like California have 60%. So the fact that Ohio is only 50 plus one creates a real big barrier in our state and then in other Midwestern states that do allow for this. And so again, the reason that this is so detrimental is because without going through the House and the Senate, it creates a real block that if this does get passed with that 50 plus one percentage, any kind of changes made to that constitutional amendment is going to be incredibly difficult to do because it goes straight to the Constitution versus through the legislative process. And we see with the language that we're seeing on this initiative and states following, there's projected between 6 and 11 states in 2024 that big abortion is going after. And they are basing their game plan off of what happens here in Ohio. And so the language that we've seen on this particular initiative, it's not just about abortion up to a certain amount of time. I mean, abortion is already legal in Ohio up to 22 weeks, which is incredibly far along, but they have made it abortion legal. What they're trying to do in this initiative is abortion legal through all 9 months of pregnancy with no kind of restrictions. And here's the thing, with incredibly broad language, without any restrictions on age or parental consent. So even looking at Roe versus Wade, these kind of constitutional amendments go so much further and are so much more dangerous because of the language that they use and because of the process that they're using. However, we have seen in other states back in 2022, shortly after Dobbs, big abortion has been successful in this kind of strategy. And it's because we weren't ready for it. It's a new kind of thing. I mean, constitutional amendments through a ballot initiative is not highly seen, but I'm telling this is what's going to be happening in states, not just in Ohio, but across the Midwest and across the country, unless we are able to kind of fight back and prepare in ways to battle this new strategy, this new extreme strategy by big abortion.
Yeah. You know, it does feel like it's happened so fast. It feels like just yesterday Dobbs happened. Roe was overturned. Now that was a year ago, but this was quick. All of a sudden, Ohio saw this and other states are seeing things like this. So I don't know if that really took us by surprise. I think what you alluded to is that it was kind of surprising, like, okay, Roe is overturned. What should we be doing? So this is Ohio saying, watch out.
And that's the reality is, I mean, it is appropriate to celebrate Roe v. Wade. And that's what we really did was we were like, okay, we've won a battle. We haven't won the war, but we've won a battle. And this is kind of our reality check of, okay, the fight's still going. Like, yes, celebrate in what we're able to accomplish, but you saw big abortion turned and the next day jumped on this fight too. And so we kind of can't let that celebration hinder us from engaging in the fight, continuing forward.
Yeah. And Jessica, I know you've been involved too on the state level.
Yeah. So, and I think what we've seen from like neighboring states here in Ohio, we've seen in Michigan, last year was one of the states that had this ballot initiative, a similar ballot initiative or constitutional amendment happen. And these things are costly. They're really difficult to get passed to begin with. Costly, I should say, passed to begin with, but it was over $60 million was spent in their campaign to pass that. 40 plus million on the pro-abortion side and 20 plus million on the pro-life side. So these aren't things that can just be run year after year, but they found that this is a way to get an end run around these pro-life states by writing these very broad constitutional amendments that sound really nice because they talk a lot about freedom and
reproductive health
and you being able to choose
without ever defining what that is.
Yeah. And so we know that with those things, like even in the Ohio amendment, there's language specifically saying, oh, this is only allowing abortion up till viability, but it allows for a health of the mother exception, which is essentially an exception that physicians can use to say for any reason the woman, like maybe mental health reasons, this woman's going to be able to get an abortion. So they're really broad and allowing them to just quickly remove all of the different progress. But we're seeing states like even South Dakota potentially having this amendment next year, states that you would typically consider very pro-life, that are going to have a real fight on their hands because people don't fully understand what they're voting on a lot of times. So that's why we really need to be educating and activating those in our orbits to be able to be speaking up and helping other people understand what's really at stake. I know Leanna has a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels like, I know in the pregnancy help world, we talk about David and Goliath a lot. Sometimes we feel like, oh, our funding is always difficult, right? For nonprofits. But then big abortion comes in and there's all this money. And so we're up against $60 million. That seems very overwhelming. But of course, we are here to be encouraged because as Christians, we know that God is on our side and we want life to win. So Leanna, you have some experience as a director. You have some state coalition experience. And so I know your involvement, this has been important to you. So tell us about what you have done and what other organizations can look towards doing to support life in their state.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. And as I was listening to Lora and Jessica share more about what's going on in Ohio specifically, I think one of the things we can acknowledge, even in the midst of the challenge that these ballot initiatives and legislative fights are, is that we also have a tremendous opportunity to engage the conversation surrounding these public debates of what access to abortion should look like and what limits, if any, should be imposed. We have an opportunity to lean into that conversation with our unique perspective on the holistic well-being of women and families. And I think, as we start to look at our local centers and what does that engagement look like, we can first recognize that the families we're serving are actually hearing these same political messages, right? They're encountering the commercials and the digital streaming ads and seeing the same yard signs that you and I are seeing. And so they may be coming into our centers and our clinics with questions and confusion and uncertainties on these same subjects. And so that does create an opportunity for us to, in our centers, make sure we're educated about what might be changing in our states, make sure our staff is educated, those who are answering the phone and maybe hearing questions from women and men who are suddenly wondering, wow, how is my potential abortion decision or my pregnancy decision being impacted by this very public and often very contentious debate? So I think we can start there, equipping internally in our centers, our staff and our volunteers with the lay of the land and helping them see that we don't have to be scared of this, but we can see this as an opportunity to meet our patients and our clients where they're at and help them see that this is a debate because there is an impact to abortion in the lives of women and men and families. And that's why this is a robust public conversation, because the stakes are high. And to help ask them those questions, how have they thought about the impact of abortion in their own life? So we can start at a really micro level, in our own centers. How does this shape our counseling conversation? How does this shape our conversation on the phone with callers? But beyond that, as you've alluded to, Christine, I think we do have opportunity as centers, as pregnancy help organizations to recognize that we have a really unique and powerful perspective to share on the well-being of families. And that's something that is valuable to public officials and those who are going to be discussing these issues in our broader communities, in our legislatures, in our states. They need our perspective because we're the ones who, as part of the grassroots army of pregnancy help organization, foot soldiers, have been in the trenches serving women and men for decades. We know what often the structural barriers in programs and in our communities are to making parenting an easier decision for families. We understand the relationship needs of women who are making pregnancy decisions alone. So we have a valuable perspective to share. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that we have something of value to offer in this conversation. And So I think that helps us lean into this conversation and not tune it out, recognizing that we have something valuable to share. And state coalitions can be a really powerful way to pool that perspective across your state and bring that perspective to bear, certainly in the legislative context, but also in regional engagement as well. And in the state that I led a center in for a number of years, we had a robust state coalition that included about 35 centers. And this state coalition allowed us to develop messaging points, to develop strategy for engaging, sometimes publicly, sometimes behind the scenes, for tracking issues as they popped up in our state, and for making sure that our story of pregnancy help was being told on our terms. When we're talking about helping women and helping those who are facing the unexpected, we want to make sure that our voice is being heard, telling that story of what we do day in and day out. So I think we can start there with some of those just important recognitions that we have opportunities in the center during seasons like this. We have a powerful perspective we need to share and articulate, and that I would say lastly, we have the permission and the power to engage in advocacy, even as 501c3 organizations. And I know Jessica has some more practical tools she can share that Heartbeat has to offer centers who are looking at how they want to engage and what that looks like in terms of the mechanics at your local center. But we have permission as 501c3s to share our perspective about what policymaking may help or harm women and families in our community. Now, we've got to steer clear of direct campaigning and endorsement of candidates to satisfy IRS rules, but we have the ability to communicate with lawmakers about the issues that are important in our community. And we have the freedom to communicate with our stakeholders about how proposed policymaking may impact our constituents and those patients and families that we're serving.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think just going back to that fact that you guys as executive directors or as, people working in pregnancy help have such a unique perspective and direct contact with the people that these laws would directly impact on a daily basis. And this is a time where you get to share that and have that real story of how abortion isn't helpful to these women. And in fact, it's hurting these women, and how these laws enshrining abortion in state constitutions will hurt them, not only them, but also obviously their unborn children. It's such a good point, Leanna. And I think something that we should, we say all the time, you are the expert. When you are in pregnancy help working on the front lines, you are the expert. And that's why it's so valuable for you to speak up.
Yeah. And I can throw out a couple practical examples of things we did, even in the context of the center I led and the state coalition I helped coordinate during a governor's race in our state. I was aware that one of the leading party's candidate was saying some things publicly that weren't really accurate about the needs of pregnant women. And this was a candidate who professed to be pro-life, but clearly didn't have a solid grasp of some of the needs of pregnant women who didn't have relational support to continue that pregnancy. And so I reached out to that campaign and invited them to come learn more about pregnancy help organizations in our community. And we did this, not with a lot of publicity per their request, but as a way to educate both that candidate and their campaign staff about, a more realistic picture of the needs that women encounter and how local nonprofit organizations have been meeting those needs for decades without taxpayer funding and serving our community well. And that was a really positive event because it gave that candidate the ability to ask questions off the record and to learn more and to reconsider how they were talking about the needs of women. And it also gave them the ability to tell the story of what organizations like ours were doing across the state. And that when they said they supported life and families, they also believed in the work that we were doing. So engaging in these larger public debates doesn't mean that you're hosting a political rally at your center. It could be really simple things like engaging behind the scenes to make sure that those who are talking about what you are doing so from a perspective of knowledge and understanding about the work you do every day. Another example, the center I led was in a community that was actually very hostile to what we did from a political perspective. And so most of our state representation was actually not necessarily enthusiastic about what we did. And yet, even with those leaders, we found we had opportunities to confound their understanding of who we were and what we did by talking about the constituencies we were serving. We served a very large refugee and asylum seeking population that had often overwhelming needs as they came to our community. We were helping in really practical ways with accessing key programs like Medicaid or other state benefit programs that our particular political leaders had a lot of interest in. And so when we were able to talk about those things and talk about how we were serving communities with really distinct needs from a perspective of compassion and care and love and kindness, it really confounded their understanding of who we were and what we were about. And so anytime we can tell that fuller story or paint that picture, we often can earn more of a right to be heard, even with officials that may or may not be on board with our larger mission.
So that's a really great point, Leanna. I was thinking as you were talking about the confusion early on in when you started explaining some of your experience, and you talked about how like these clients are the people who have been in your community and are seeing the TV commercials and the ads and the yard signs, and they're like, I don't know, they're talking about freedom, reproductive freedom, they're talking about women's health. Like women's health is absolutely important, and there's so much confusion. And so a big piece of this is just getting the truth out and just speaking truth and talking about what's really at stake here. And sometimes I think pregnancy centers, you can feel kind of alone in that because you just feel like a small voice in this big crowd. But I really think that there are people in the community too who are willing to help. I know those relationships with like churches already exist a lot of times, and they're the ones that do the baby bottle campaigns and things with you. And maybe they would be interested in putting a flyer in their bulletin or having a flyer out in church somewhere, or even this would be awesome to have the pastor talking about it during the church service. Like if he's willing to just mention it, direct to some resources or talk about the great work of pregnancy help, just to help advance the truth about what everyone's doing. So finding those people within your own community that can help you so that it isn't just your voice, it's a collective group of voices that are speaking truth. And those are trusted voices within the community because they know the work that you do. So I'm sure, Leanna, you have some experience too with just those connections with churches.
Yeah, and I think that broader community narrative is going to be really important, right? And so state family policy councils, which I know Jessica will mention a website that Heartbeat has that will point you to your local state family policy council if you don't already know what that group is. But, often these groups are publishing resources and equipping pastors and churches and organizations in the state that you're in on these very issues. So, our State Pregnancy Center Coalition also published an annual impact report showing the dollar value of millions of dollars of free services that our organizations were providing our communities and our state. And these are powerful messaging tools that we can use to tell that broader story. Certainly, churches can be part of that as well. And we want to make sure that those who are our organization's biggest stakeholders also have that clear understanding of what we do, so that when they're hearing those narratives of, these are fake clinics that manipulate women, that they can speak to, well, no, I've actually been on site and I have toured that clinic and I know the medical director and I have confidence in the services they provide because 99% of their patients say they would recommend the care they've received there, right? So we got to make sure our stakeholders know who we are, that they've been on site, that they're equipped to also help us tell that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great points. Thank you. So Jessica, we've mentioned some of the things involved in this webpage that you've worked so hard to put together just recently. I know you sent me the link when it was finished and I was so excited. I looked through it and I learned a lot and I thought I had been following this closely. So there is a wealth of information on there. Let's talk about what is on this webpage, how people can access it, and anything else, how they can maximize their use of what's available to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So with this upcoming election, obviously, Ohio's being the featured one. this November, but we see this strategy unfolding throughout the nation of ballot initiatives, constitutional amendments. Obviously, next year there's going to be so much more on the ballot. And so just in advance of that, we need to be educating ourselves and our supporters. So we wanted to put this resource together for you so that you are best equipped on how you're able to do that, and hopefully some talking points or some information on how to communicate about this issue. So first of all, we have just a few different pages kind of assembled. One of them kind of some broad information about getting out the vote and how important it is this November and next year as well. Then we also have information on just strategy and action steps for what you can do. So just to talk a little bit about that, Leanna's already kind of covered a couple of these things, but at the top, we talk about what you are and are not allowed to do as a 501c3. I think a lot of times in the nonprofit world, we're told, don't touch politics, don't come anywhere close to it, etc. And that's not true. There's definitely some things that we need to be aware of and things that you aren't allowed to do, but there's a lot of freedom in engaging, and there's a lot of creative ways that you can do that are perfectly legal that honestly you're encouraged to do. And so we have some talking points or some guidelines on that, but specifically on the ballot initiative constitutional amendment area, you as a nonprofit are allowed to speak up on policy issues like that and whether or not you support or oppose those issues. You're not allowed to, as Leanna said, endorse a candidate or things along those lines, but with constitutional amendments, there's no candidate to be endorsed. And so you're allowed to speak up in any way you would like to do. There is some restrictions on it being a quote unquote insubstantial amount of your overall budgets of what you do. And that's generally assumed to be about 5 to 15% of the work that you do. There's no direct number that the IRS lists, but that is kind of the assumed guidelines of the percentage of what an insubstantial amount would mean. So some basic things that you can do, of course, make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure the people coming through your doors are registered to vote. Make sure that your supporters and stakeholders are registered to vote. It is always shocking to me every year when we get statistics about voter registration numbers and population numbers in our states of how few people are registered to vote and how few people actually vote every year. So you may think that, no, they're all politically engaged. Everyone that we talk to knows what to do. Don't make that assumption. Make sure they're registered to vote. Also important is to check your voting deadlines. As absentee voting is more and more prevalent, it is really important that you know when your early voting and absentee voting deadlines are. Here in Ohio, there's 28 days of early voting ahead of the election. And so you don't know when the people you're talking to are going to vote. And so make sure you get to talk to them early before those polls open. As Leanna mentioned, joining and coming alongside your state coalition of pregnancy help. That is such a benefit to you. If your state doesn't have one, please work to create one. And I know that we would be more than willing to help you do that. That is something that's so vital to come alongside like-minded groups, especially when there's attacks along these lines happening in your state. And of course, also, as she mentioned, we have a tool here that you can go and find your local Family Research Council or Right to Life group. They're going to have talking points and information on what's happening in your state and when those deadlines and things are coming up. They're a valuable resource to you. And of course, educate your supporters. As I mentioned before, you may think that they're fully engaged, understand what the constitutional amendment will do and why they should vote a certain way on it. But so often people aren't engaged on these issues. It's easy to get burnt out listening to this. And these supporters of yours are clearly engaged and invested in what you're doing. And they trust you as an organization and your opinions of what's happening and how it impacts the women that you serve. So take some time to educate them. That is something you are very much allowed to do about what these things are happening and how they directly impact the work that you do every day, because obviously these things will impact you. So there's some just general, there's a lot more details on the webpage. We have also a resource listing all of the different state amendments that are either on the ballot or are coming up. So you can find more details about them, and we will be updating those pages as those deadlines come up and as signatures are submitted and things along those lines, with details so you understand what exactly is happening and in which states they're happening. And finally, I have an article there just kind of going over in depth what this strategy is and why states, kind of encapsulating what Lora said earlier about why the ACLU and Planned Parenthood and other big abortion are choosing these kinds of strategies to try to enshrine abortion in our state constitutions, and why we need to be engaged on this issue. Even if we think we live in a very pro-life state, this is a strategy that unfortunately has the ability to make an impact. And so we need to be aware, and we need to be protecting our constitutions.
I love what Leanna pointed out about centers, and I mean centers and churches and other community groups, but specifically centers and center directors. You are the ones talking to the target demographic that these type of ballot initiatives are coming after. And being in the pregnancy help area, I mean, you are the people who know that big abortion is lying. You are all that know that big abortion is not about women, is not about healthcare. And we're seeing that very clearly in these type of ballot initiatives. And so I can understand the awkwardness that Leanna talked about, like how much should a center get involved, or what Jessica just said, like it is really easy to get burnt out on these types of issues. But this is my 2 cents of urgency is, I mean, big abortion's coming after your girls, and they're lying. I mean, with the type of language that they're using, that's very broad and misleading. Even people who are paying attention are getting lied to. And so this is an incredible opportunity, like Leanna said, for centers to directly get involved and say, we do care about women. We do care about the unborn child. And that's why we take this stance, and we're going to stand behind it because we care.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We covered a lot of things, and it can feel a bit overwhelming to think about what you might be up against. But I just hope our listeners are really encouraged by this, to know that the resources are out there, the help is out there. Heartbeat is here to support you. We're praying for you every day. So I just hope that you are encouraged and, are taking that time to take care of yourself in the midst of all of this. Take time to pray each day, pray over your team, put on the full armor of God. Just cover your organization in prayer, cover your state in prayer. And we are praying with you. Heartbeat, we gather each morning to pray every single day. And we pray for our friends in the pro-life movement who are on the ground working hard each day to really protect these women and these families. So thank you to everything that you guys are doing as listeners, as supporters, even as people who just want to stay updated on the pregnancy help movement. Getting the truth out there is so important. And that's one of my favorite things to talk about is the pregnancy help movement, because I love what is happening. I love the client stories. Keep telling those stories and keep doing the work that you're doing. So I will include links to the number one link will definitely be that Get Out the Vote page, set of pages really that Jessica and her team has been working on. It's such a valuable resource. So I encourage you to check that out, read through it, contact Heartbeat if you have any questions. And of course, subscribe to this podcast, because we will keep you informed on what's happening and new ideas, new thoughts, new ways that you guys can be working within your state and within this country as we continue the fight for life. So thanks for all you do. And thanks for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.